Good afternoon. My name's Merran Smith, and I'm a fellow at Simon Fraser University, the founder of Clean Energy Canada, and the co-chair of BC's Climate Solutions Council. And I'd like to acknowledge that Premier Horgan and I are on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees, and the Esquimalt First Nation. It's my pleasure to be here today in person with Premier Horgan. With the cyclone bomb going on out there, we are here in Victoria, and we're going to be joined virtually by Minister Heyman, plus my colleagues from the Climate Solutions Council, Colleen Giroux-Schmidt and Mark Jaccard, plus the president of Seaspan Marine Transportation, McIver. Ian was going to be hosting us today, but the weather's switched things up for us. And the weather has been a conversation in BC over the past year. We felt the devastating impacts of climate change firsthand this summer. We watched the community of Lytton burn to the ground due to climate change. The heat dome killed crops and wildlife and British Columbians, some of our friends and our neighbors. I grew up in this province, running around as a kid in the summer, breathing clean air. But this summer, we all breathed smoke, and for days, some of us, and for weeks, others. And this is really the new normal for our kids in the summers in British Columbia. It's being called a climate emergency around the world, and here in BC, we're feeling the impacts here. So in order to solve this emergency, every nation, every province or state, city or council, and community and businesses, we all need to do our part. So when Minister Heyman asked me to join the BC Climate Solutions Council, I knew we had an opportunity to do the right thing here in BC, to cut our carbon pollution, to transition to clean energy and away from fossil fuels, and to transition to a 21st century economy that was more equitable and inclusive, including with Indigenous nations. So I'm very, very pleased to be here today with the Premier and the Minister to announce BC's next phase of climate action. It's my pleasure to introduce Premier Horgan.
Good? Pocket. Thank you, Merran, and good afternoon, everyone. It is great to be here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people. I want to thank Merran and Colleen for their work with the Climate Solutions Council. I want to thank Dr. Jaccard for his, quite frankly, lifetime of work on this very important subject. And to Ian McIver, thank you as well for helping us today launch the CleanBC Roadmap to 2030. A strong and ambitious climate plan to deliver on BC's commitment to reduce climate pollution, build a better, cleaner economy for everyone, and doing so with the enormous progress that we've made over the past couple of years. With the support of CleanBC, companies like Seaspan and Corvus Energy have joined forces to make shipping cleaner and more affordable, not just here in British Columbia, but indeed internationally. And Seaspan is converting a cargo ferry to from fossil fuels to biofuels. We would have been talking about that in more detail. I'm sure Ian will say something about that later on in the agenda. But he'll talk about Corvus and homegrown batteries and all of the technological innovation that's coming out of British Columbia as we collectively do our part to address the globe's biggest challenge. Merran touched upon this past summer, but I've had the honor of being Premier for 4 summers now, and 3 of those 4 summers were the worst fire seasons in BC history. Add on to that the devastation of the heat dome this past summer, and I think all British Columbians, indeed all Canadians, are focused on making progress on climate change, not sometime in the future, but right now. The threat is no longer decades away. It is here with us in everything that we do. Impacts of flooding, which will likely follow the cyclone bomb of this weekend, are also ever present for people living in British Columbia. Our rivers used to be the highway for our salmon. Now they are potential devastation for our communities, and that has to stop. We need to make sure that we're regulating the carbon emissions of our largest polluters. We need to make sure we're assisting people in making a transition from how they do business today to how we need to do business in the future. And I believe that the progress that we've made under the leadership of Minister Heyman is outstanding relative to our friends across the country and indeed across the continent. But we can't rest on our laurels. Indeed, now is the time when British Columbians and Canadians are focused on the imperative of action to work with the incoming federal government to deliver on the promise of CleanBC here. And I believe our roadmap will do that by powering businesses and communities to make changes in how they act. In changes, that means using our abundance of clean electricity, electrifying those fossil fuel industries that are still out there, and making sure as we put a cap on those emissions, reduce methane pollution, we can do so in a way that makes a transition over time so that we meet our 2030 goals and we get to net zero by 2050. The Seaspan Corvus example is there, and I'm sure Ian will talk about that. But our province is uniquely positioned to thrive in a low-carbon economy. For decades now in British Columbia, successive governments have focused on this initiative, and we have dialed it up since 2017 because the chance and the opportunity to build an economy that's focused on clean energy, focused on reducing emissions, is exactly what British Columbians have asked us to do, and we have every intention of delivering on that promise to everyone in British Columbia. We have to have the same common purpose to attacking climate change that we have had to attacking COVID-19. This transcends political boundaries. It transcends regions of British Columbia, all of us working together with a singular focus on lifting up everyone. As we put a price on carbon pollution, we have to make sure that the low-income and moderate-income British Columbians do not suffer from that. As we bring forward initiatives to make housing less carbon focused and more carbon friendly, we need to make sure that there are government programs in place that will stimulate the economic activity that will build the economy of the future. There are challenges ahead for all of us, there is no doubt. But with challenge also comes opportunity. Seaspan and Corvus can speak to that. But it's not just those two companies, it's companies right across British Columbia that have been focusing for the past decade on how they can take this challenge and make it an opportunity, create wealth and opportunity for themselves and other British Columbians. That's our focus with the roadmap to 2030. I'll now pass it on to Minister Heyman. He can provide more details on how we're going to get there.
Thank you very much, Premier. I want to acknowledge that I and other speakers are joining you today from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. Today's a really important day for climate action and the clean economy in British Columbia. I want to thank you, Premier Horgan, for your leadership. I also want to thank Merran Smith, Colleen Giroux-Schmidt, and Mark Jaccard, all of whom have played an important role in the development of this CleanBC Roadmap and have shown leadership in British Columbia to tackle this issue for a long time. I recognize the leadership of Ian McIver and the entire team at Seaspan. It's too bad that due to today's weather, we could not be on site at Seaspan today. Today's announcement is the result of significant collaboration between businesses and government, Indigenous nations, all levels of government, in fact, and the public coming together. It shows what we can accomplish when we're working together. Our government has taken the advice, the independent advice of the Climate Solutions Council, made up of members who represent diverse backgrounds across British Columbia, policy experts, labor leaders, youth, business, local government, Indigenous leaders, and environmental organizations. The science is crystal clear about our climate emergency. Weather events like this weekend and today are becoming more impactful, and the time to act is now. This CleanBC Roadmap is our plan to fully meet our 2030 emissions target and build new opportunities for people across BC. The roadmap includes accelerated and expanded actions across different pathways with a focus on affordability and supporting business transitions. The roadmap considers the state of clean technology and solutions for each sector and works to bring down costs and increase availability. It builds on and strengthens the actions that we have already taken since 2018 with CleanBC and that are on track to significantly reduce emissions. It also includes new ones. We've had early successes, but we know that much more needs to be done, and that's why we've developed this roadmap to reach 100% of our 2030 target and set the foundation for future years and future targets. Across British Columbia, people have responded positively since we first announced our plan. For example, British Columbia has the largest uptake of electric vehicles per capita on this continent. We were the first jurisdiction in the world with a 100% zero-emission law in place. And we're going to accelerate that with this roadmap. BC will mandate that 90% of all new car truck sales be clean and zero emission by 2030 and 100% by 2035. We can do this because we've seen that the auto industry and other governments saw what we were doing and decided that we need to move faster, spurred on by actions that we and other subnationals have taken. Also, as part of this roadmap, we're developing new medium and heavy-duty vehicle zero-emission requirements because the science is clear. We need to rapidly move to clean energy in absolutely everything we do. We know that the global economy is quickly moving toward a net zero emissions future. There are investment opportunities for companies that have a commitment to net zero emissions. That, in fact, is on the agenda for the upcoming UN Climate Conference in Glasgow. And in turn, companies that don't have a plan are facing stiff questioning from investors who are turning away. In BC, some of our largest industrial operators, accounting for 50% of our industrial emissions, have already taken the first step and committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Our roadmap will help BC industry thrive in this new environment, so our exports are not replaced by higher carbon products from elsewhere. We've already launched 22 emission reduction projects together with industry through our CleanBC Industry Fund, and these projects are expected to reduce nearly 1 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent between now and 2030. We also recently announced a range of measures with BC Hydro to encourage switching to clean electricity. Our plan means that BC will attract only industrial projects that are already designed to be low carbon in line with our targets and ready for a net zero emissions future. This will reduce the emissions impact of any new industrial development. We made our oil and gas sectoral targets clear a year ago, and this roadmap includes our commitment to meet that reduction target. We will work with experts, industry, and Indigenous nations on programs and policies that will achieve this, including regulation where necessary. This roadmap also includes a wide range of additional policies that will ensure industry emissions are in line with our sectoral and provincial emission reduction targets, while also maintaining healthy business environment and competitiveness. The roadmap has many, many more actions to transition to a cleaner future and to maintain affordability in buildings, in communities, in transportation across British Columbia. We know that the changing climate is creating uncertainty for British Columbians and everyone around the globe. Risks and creativity are part of this equation. But actions can fuel optimism and success. Thriving in this environment takes leadership. Leadership by government, leadership by communities, leadership by industry, and it takes improving as we learn more. Today, we want to acknowledge the leadership that Seaspan has taken to move its ferry fleet to a net zero future. The combination of electrification, low-carbon fuels, and a re-examination of the way it operates puts Seaspan among the first in their sector to design their net zero future. This reflects a BC brand of leadership, and I want to offer thanks to Seaspan CEO Ian McIver for seeing this opportunity and for making it happen. What is taking place at Seaspan is now happening right across the province. People are seeing the opportunities for change and moving to a cleaner, brighter future. The CleanBC Roadmap that our government has put together, along with our accountability measures in the Climate Change Accountability Act, are very important tools in building that future. Thank you very much, and I'd now like to introduce Ian McIver, President of Seaspan Marine Transportation, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heyman, and the Premier, too, for this opportunity to tell the Seaspan story and our journey to a greener future. Seaspan Marine Transportation is continually evaluating our options for alternative and low-carbon fuels, and we're very excited to have several successful projects under our belt and others in development. Seaspan Marine has invested with High Sea, our Haisla Nation joint venture, to service LNG Canada, in LNG-fueled escort tugs, as well as full electric ship docking tugs. Likewise, Seaspan Ferries has LNG hybrid ro-ro vessels. These are ferries operating between the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island since 2016, and will soon add 2 more LNG hybrid vessels to that fleet by first quarter of 2022. Seaspan has been working closely with CleanBC and with the BC Low Carbon Fuel Standards in order to utilize existing legislation to lead the way in emissions reductions in the marine industry. We're happy that BC has such a strong greenhouse gas reduction regulation, and we look forward to continuing the development of this policy and the resulting programs. As part of our emissions reduction strategy, we've found ways to bring several low-emissions fuels and technologies into our fleet. Biofuels. Seaspan Ferries has successfully tested and operated vessels on 100% biofuel, which offers significant reduction in GHGs. We'll run vessels on biofuel as part of our long-term emissions reduction strategy, and we'll increase its usage across our fleets where it is the best solution to reduce emissions. With LNG, Seaspan Ferries and Seaspan Marine both have vessels either in operation or in construction that consume LNG as fuel. LNG already offers a sizable reduction in greenhouse gases, but with the introduction of carbon-neutral sources of natural gas, such as renewable natural gas, RNG, from FortisBC, this reduction can be multiplied. We successfully completed a carbon-neutral RNG pilot with our supply partners, FortisBC, after the recent reopening of their RNG program, and will look to increase RNG consumption as the program and volumes available move forward. Propulsion battery technology. Seaspan Marine, through investment in battery hybrid vessels for Seaspan Ferries, or full battery-powered ship docking tugs with the High Sea Marine company, continues to leverage battery technology for propulsion systems. The use of batteries allows us to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and to work with BC Hydro to fuel our ships with clean electricity. Seaspan Ferries has been operating these hybrid vessels since 2016, and we continue to invest in those vessels by installing larger battery banks, and that is with our partners at Corvus Energy. So we're replacing some of the battery banks with larger ones. Zero emissions vehicles. We have vehicles running around in our terminals, and we are moving towards testing and hopefully a future investment in a whole fleet of battery electric terminal trucks. They'll be fueled, of course, with clean electricity from BC Hydro. We have a very strong feeling that that's going to be a successful project moving forward. Lastly, we're looking at LNG bunker fuel. This is a prime gateway here in Vancouver to Asia for Canadian commodities and trade. Seaspan will continue to leverage the clean LNG resources here in Canada, and is currently developing an LNG bunkering business with Fortis to enable foreign-going vessels calling on Vancouver to have access to clean LNG and RLNG, renewable LNG, to power their ships. The last thing, we are an operating company, and one of the things that I think we all need to think about is how we operate and efficiently deploy our assets and use technology in the deployment of our assets to minimize emissions across all platforms, regardless of the fuel type. And I think that's a big initiative that everybody should be working on. So in closing, 2030, it's only 8 years from now, and we need all the tools the government has at its disposal to support our efforts to ensure we collectively meet those 2030 and 2050 climate action goals. So that's my remarks for now, and I'd like to introduce Colleen Giroux-Schmidt. She's the co-chair of the Climate Solution Council and VP at Energia. So I'll introduce her right now.
Thank you. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude for being here today on the traditional lands of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh. I'd also like to express gratitude to the Premier, to Minister Heyman, for their government's leadership in announcing the roadmap today. I'd also like to share my gratitude with my colleagues from the Climate Solutions Council. It's an incredible group of people that challenged and were able to work and push, I think, to help the roadmap be what it is today. And I'd also like to express gratitude to my colleagues at Interjex who shared me for this last 2 years. The council experience for me has been interwoven with becoming a parent. The minister asked me to join the council when I was expecting my first son, and he's been in the background for many of our meetings this year. I highlight this today to underscore the sense of urgency for why we need to act. These dates are not abstract. 2030, my son will be 11 years old. In 2035, when we have 100% zero-emission vehicle reg here in BC, he'll be 16 and learning to drive, maybe. And in 2050, he's going to be younger than I am right now. So the roadmap is great, but it also is going to require a lot of work from all of us. And so we need to get started this afternoon. As been mentioned, the scope of this challenge and opportunity is vast. It's going to need cooperation and action from all levels of government. It's going to need the commitment and funding from the private sector. And it's going to need all of us as individuals also contributing. The opportunity we have in front of us is to transform our society, our economy, and our lives here in British Columbia and around the world. This isn't about tinkering with what we have to date. This is about looking at what we need to be in 2050 and beyond, and working to build that society and economy today. BC has an opportunity to thrive in this, and at Interjex we believe in building a better world through renewable energy, and we're here to contribute and see this opportunity through. I want to finish by sharing the story of the hummingbird. Can't see it on camera, but I've got hummingbird on my dress and on my mask. Hummingbird was in a forest that was burning, and all of the other animals were standing and watching their home burn. Hummingbird went to the river and took a drop of water in her beak and went and dropped it on the flames. And she did this again and again. The other animals asked Hummingbird, "What are you doing?" And she responded, "What I can." We all need to be Hummingbird now going forward so that in 2050, my son is not having this conversation again and he's living in that better world. Thank you, and I'd now like to introduce my colleague from the Climate Solutions Council, Mark Jaccard.
Thank you. Thanks, Colleen. That's tough to follow. That was fantastic. I've been involved in climate policy for 30 years, and I know from this experience that achieving effective climate policy is an extremely difficult task. Effective climate policy nudges people to use slightly different technologies and do things slightly differently, like charging the battery in their electric car or installing an electric heat pump in their home. The reality is that some vocal people won't want to do this, even though the change is small and the extra cost small or even zero. Politicians know that the media will focus on and amplify these complaints. And this is difficult because politicians instinctively want to please everyone. Isn't that right, George? Thus, for success with the climate challenge, we need politicians to show leadership. We need politicians who are willing to do the right thing and face the consequences. In 2018, the NDP government of John Horgan showed North American leadership with its CleanBC climate plan. It showed that it was willing to implement the difficult but essential policies, a rising carbon price, and tightening regulations that together reduce the burning of coal, gasoline, diesel, and natural gas. Without these policies, climate targets promised by politicians are not sincere. Today, with its 2021 roadmap, this government is demonstrating yet again, and with greater effect, climate leadership. And myself, as a lead author on climate policy with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I can say that this leadership shown today is of global significance. Now, however, comes the hard part. The government must quickly implement the key policies of this roadmap. The carbon price must keep rising, and the regulations must meet or exceed the stated levels, including a zero-emission electricity requirement, the zero-emission vehicle mandate, the cap on natural gas emissions, and declining cap on oil and gas production emissions, bioenergy requirements, and a more ambitious low-carbon fuel standard, as well as support to Indigenous peoples, low-income households, and others who may need help with this climate-saving transition. I am honored and proud to have contributed to this policy design as a member of the Climate Solutions Council. But I especially believe that it is this government that should be extremely proud today of its global climate leadership. I now hand it back to Merran Smith, I believe, who's the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and Colleen and Mark for participating in this event today. Special thanks to Mark and Colleen and all of the Climate Solutions Council for the many hours that they put in advising the government. I really want to thank the Premier here today and the Minister in Vancouver for their bold and courageous steps forward with this roadmap to 2021. As Mark has mentioned, this is really a significant world-leading and continent-leading plan, and I'm proud of BC for moving forward with this. So thank you. But this is a roadmap for a journey that we have to take together, and what matters today is not what gets said. What matters is not what gets said today, but what gets done. And that's what will be judged by our peers, our kids, and their kids. So with 2030 approaching, as has been said, there's simply no time to waste, and the next 6 months are going to be crucial. What's exciting is that the world is transitioning to a clean energy economy, and that our global trading partners have shown that a good climate plan is also a good economic strategy. And so with the release of today's roadmap, BC has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to link its economic and its climate goals, and that's exciting. But if we're going to follow this roadmap and get to our destination by 2030, it's going to take the best of all of us, of industry, the clean tech sector, Indigenous peoples, cities, and academia, NGOs. It's going to take the best of all of us working together. It's easy to criticize, it's easy to point fingers at somebody else, but we need to pull together and pull our best selves forward if we're going to succeed and beat the climate emergency that we're in. And we need to do this for our kids. And so I'll now turn this over to Lindsay so we can take questions from the media.
Great. Thank you, Merran. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press star 1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up. First question today is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail.
Thank you. My question to the Premier. There's a new UN report out today that says greenhouse gas concentrations hit a record high last year, and the world is way off track in capping rising temperatures. So here in BC, we spent 14 years trying to cut emissions, and the result is, it seems like, ever-growing GHGs. And I'm wondering, when are we going to actually see in concrete measurements?
Well,
Justine,
thank
for the
you,
question.
Justine.
And I agree with you that despite the extraordinary efforts by British Columbians, regular folks, business, labor, everyone, the continuum of people here in BC to try our best to reduce our emissions, to be leaders in the country and in the continent, we see all around us challenges. And that's why COP26 is so important. And I'm very proud that Minister Heyman will be representing British Columbia in Glasgow as we talk to industry, international leaders, sub-national governments as well as national governments about how we need to up our game. And the roadmap, as Dr. Jaccard said, is our way through that. That means that we need to ensure that the regulations that we put in place to make this real happen as quickly as possible, and they're in place with backstops for business to ensure that we can keep them competitive as they make these transitions, as well as, of course, families. As we increase costs to them, we have to make sure that we have programs in place for low and middle income families, and also opportunities for them to reduce their emissions through changing their transportation habits, changing how they heat their home. All of those initiatives are within our grasp. And again, it's been an awful lot of hard work by a great number of people. And despite that effort, you're quite right, we have a long way to go. But we can't wait any longer. We can't continue to kick the can down the road. And that's what the roadmap is about. And that's what we want to see, not just in Canada, but internationally coming out of Glasgow.
Justine, do you have a follow-up?
Justine, are you there?
Justine, are you there?
Okay, we will come back.
Okay, we will come back if she rejoins. Next question is from Binder Sajjan, CTV.
Hi, Premier. I just wanted to follow up on something that you spoke about, immediate action. There are those who say that banning or severely limiting old growth, logging, and doing away with the LNG industry would be the kind of urgent action that's required right now to tackle climate change. So how can you say your government is serious about tackling climate change and doing everything possible, given your position on these issues?
First of all, our position on these issues is to make progress. That's what we set out to do in 2017. We put in place guidelines for LNG Canada, making it the cleanest LNG in the world. We want to, as Ian said, about how do we deal with the marine industry, emissions that are not toted up to Canada or British Columbia, but are affecting the challenges that we all face. LNG bunkering in the Port of Vancouver will mean that we can reduce emissions in the marine fleets of countries around the world. In my discussions with the cruise ship industry, the notion of LNG bunkering is very appealing to them. We already, in our ports, electrify so that when vessels come to port, we can plug them in rather than having them continue to burn diesel or bunker fuel while they're in port. So these are initiatives and steps we've taken using the tools at our disposal to reduce emissions across the board. We will be having more to say about old growth strategies in the weeks ahead. We have been working on that diligently. A challenge, again, in the international sphere, and perhaps Mark Jaccard might want to touch upon this, but how we tote up our carbon sinks, our forests, as assets to us in this undertaking are not internationally recognized. And we need to make sure that we can do more to ensure that we can provide opportunities for the ranching sector, for the forest sector, to see other ways for our forests to be toted up, not just as timber, but as a carbon sink, as assisting us with biodiversity, and all of the other things that our forests present to us. Historically, governments have looked at forests as timber and timber as revenue. We are changing that, and we'll have more to say. We've got legislation before the House right now, and more to come.
Follow-up, Binder?
Follow-up, Binder?
Yes, I just want to also ask you about carbon pricing, and I know the goal is to either meet or beat federal targets. So how confident are you that within this plan that BC can still remain competitive if this happens?
Well, we don't want to just leave it to the federal government. We want to make sure that the programs that we put in place over time to reduce the impact of carbon pricing on low and moderate income families remain in place. And in fact, we want to beef those up as carbon prices rise over the decade. And I want to just put people at rest that carbon pricing will be a collaborative effort between the two orders of government, and it will be done in a way that ensures that we have got programs in place to protect the most vulnerable. affordable. But we do need to change how we move around, and a key part of that is putting in place other initiatives like public transit, the SkyTrain initiatives that we've launched, whether it be out to UBC or from Surrey to Langley, and then improvements to allow people to get into low-emission vehicles in a more cost-effective way. All of these programs are designed to meet our targets 10 years out, and then, of course, net zero by 2050. There's no magic wand here. Dr. Jaccard's been 30 years at this. I know Merran and Colleen have been working on these issues tirelessly for a long, long time. If there was a magic solution, we'd all be adopting it. It takes hard work, it takes collaboration, and I'm grateful to have allies like Governor Jay Inslee and Kate Brown in Oregon, as well as Gavin Newsom in California. The corridor, the Cascadia corridor, is a key part of the changes that we want to make here in British Columbia, working with our neighbours to the south and encouraging other Canadians, other provinces to follow our lead.
Minister Heyman, over to you.
Thank you. As we've seen the carbon tax go up in British Columbia, we've raised the low and middle income climate action tax credit accordingly. We are currently working to figure out how we can design a very effective climate action tax credit system that works for low and moderate income people with a rising carbon price, as has been indicated is coming from the federal government. We're also working with industry to ensure that our CleanBC programs for industry continue to help them both reduce emissions and remain viable. We've seen many industries in British Columbia apply for joint funding with the British Columbia government through our program for industry to invest in often made in BC technologies that reduce emissions, that make the industry more productive and keep them going. We know the climate is changing worldwide, and not just the climate we think of, but also the investment climate. People are expecting companies and governments to provide some certainty about where we're going. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And what I can assure British Columbians is that we have not just the rebate system, but we have a range of supports, whether it's in public transportation, whether it's in zero-emission vehicles, whether it's in energy-efficient homes, that will help you at whatever income level you are make the changes that we want to see. And those, in turn, will make life more affordable for everyone.
Next question is from Richard Zussman, Global News.
Premier, to change the topic for a moment here, we've reached the deadline where those in long-term care must be fully immunized to work. After some were put on unpaid leave for 2 weeks, we're also hitting the deadline for the healthcare system to be fully immunized for workers. Can you assure British Columbians that the service they receive through long-term care or through our healthcare sector will not be disrupted by workers either losing their jobs or being put on leave?
Thank you for the question. And of course, if unvaccinated workers become ill, that has an impact on the system. If those unvaccinated workers become ill and they're asymptomatic, they can bring COVID-19 into their workforce, which will further disrupt services to those citizens, whether they be in long-term care or acute care facilities across British Columbia. I'm confident that with the time that's been made available to health authorities, working with Dr. Henry and Minister Dix, that our health authorities are in a position to ensure that we can continue to provide world-class quality care to British Columbians in every setting possible. But we need to make sure that people understand that the safest way to protect all that we care about, all of the things that we hold so dear, most importantly our loved ones, is to ensure that those that interact with them are vaccinated. That's been the thrust of our initiatives, and we've done remarkably well compared to other jurisdictions in the world. Our success rate on the immunization program is absolutely stellar, and I'm confident that we'll continue to see people getting vaccinated, and as we see vaccinations or immunization programs being approved by the federal government for 5 to 11-year-olds, we'll see that coming into the school system, and that'll be more protection for people in the weeks and months ahead.
Follow-up, Richard?
Yeah, we saw this, a number of cases connected to a Blue Grotto concert in Kamloops last week. The operator of that venue is saying that this is an example that we should not be lifting the capacity restrictions that we see getting lifted here. Are you worried about, even in places where we've seen proof of immunization, that we could have spread of the virus and continue to set BC back in our fight against COVID-19?
Working diligently, as you know, on these issues, Dr. Henry, Minister Dix, myself, and public officials across government and within our health authorities. We have, of course, in different parts of the province, an unevenness of immunization. In the interior and in the north, we have more work to do. We believe that the capacity limits that will be lifted in the days, well, now, are appropriate, and we'll continue to monitor the situation and see where we go from here. But we're confident that the vast majority of British Columbians understand and respect that not only do we need to ensure that we're vaccinated, but we also have to continue to wear masks when it's appropriate to do so, to be as distant as we can be in the interest of public safety, and of course washing the hands, making sure we're taking steps to avoid unnecessary contact. And those are issues that Dr. Henry and Minister Dix will be talking about tomorrow in their media availability.
Lisa Houston, News 1130.
Hi there, Premier. I wanted to ask about, I'm asking about health as well, but with the school staff mandate, it was very quiet on Friday that the province at the end of the day did like the Friday dump of putting it out to the province what the guidelines are. And it feels to many like the province is pushing the responsibility to the districts because they're just, it's sort of a way of buying time. And one of the big ones is pushing the legal responsibility of this to the school districts instead of the province being able to take that on. Is this just a way to kick it down the line? And it feels a little bit like the province is, by some accounts, is abdicating their responsibility with helping people get vaccine mandates for staff at schools.
We have been working with stakeholders in the K-12 system for a year and a half to try and make sure we put in place the best practices based on the information available to us, based on the availability of vaccines, which of course were not readily available until the spring of this year. But at the end of the day, and I've been saying this now for some weeks, the relationship between employees and employer is not one with the province, it's with locally elected school boards. And there was some talk when we made these revelations to the public that certainly school boards, trustees and their staff are well aware of that. And they have every access to decision makers here in Victoria, whether it be the minister, whether it be Dr. Henry and Minister Dix, to get whatever information they need about why they should move in this direction. Our focus has always been to increase the number of people that are immunized, to increase, of course, protection across the board. We're doing what I believe is appropriate, allowing the responsible entity, in this case trustees, to make decisions about their staff. And we stand ready with the provincial guidelines that were released on Friday to assist in any way possible.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and with the healthcare worker mandate, looking at what's happened in Ontario, that there's a few of them that have managed to get a temporary injunction. I'm just wondering how the province might deal with that, if you're concerned about that, and ultimately at the end of the day, what will be success for you, what will be considered success with the vaccine mandate?
More people getting immunized and protecting vulnerable populations, whether they be in long-term care, whether they're in assisted living, or whether they're accessing our acute care system for emergency or for surgeries. That's the objective here. And if there are challenges down the road, as with everything, it seems, since we came to government, we'll deal with it as it arises. I can't predict what others will do. I do know that the overwhelming majority of healthcare workers are immunized and are science-based in their approach to life. And they're oftentimes perplexed at why people wouldn't follow good, solid science and follow the lead of Dr. Henry and the immunization team and get those vaccinations. We stand ready to immunize anyone, all comers, and that's the message coming out of this initiative. And I'm hopeful that the small number of of workers who are still resistant to that will get the information they need, they'll be comfortable with their choices, and we can continue on to provide quality service for British Columbians.
Next question is from Lisa Cordesco, Vancouver Sun.
Thank you. Critics have said that the LNG Canada project will make it difficult, if not impossible, to meet deadlines and targets. What is in your plan that ensures that this project will not prevent BC from reaching its 2030 goals?
Well, we have sectoral targets. I'll push this off to George, Lisa, but we have sectoral targets for the oil and gas industry, other heavy emitters, as well as other sectors of the economy and people's lives. We know that the LNG Canada project fits into the plan that we laid out in 2018. It was fundamental that we work with the BC Business Council and other large emitters to fully understand the consequences of LNG Canada to their emission profile and what steps they could take to reduce their emissions in the short term, and of course now with the roadmap in the immediate term leading to a net zero by 2050. But we moved forward with LNG Canada because we were confident it would fit within the plan. We're still confident of that, and perhaps George may have some more detail he could add to that question.
Mr. Heyman, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, LNG Canada Phase 1 is definitely modeled in the CleanBC plan. It continues to be modeled in the roadmap. In addition to that, we have a sectoral target of reducing emissions from the oil and gas sector overall by 33 to 38%. That's clearly part of the emission reductions projected in the roadmap. We've made it very clear. We expect to bring down emissions to at least 9 megatons in this sector by 2030. We need to work with Indigenous nations, with the industry, with experts to determine how to do that, and we'll use regulation where necessary, as well as policies and different programs and different forms of emission reduction.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yes. Can you tell me what tangible differences will British Columbians see in their lives and how they go about their daily lives by 2030?
Well, I'm hopeful they're going to have cleaner air to breathe. There are going to be fewer fires. They're going to have access to different transportation options that are either zero emitting or heading in that direction. I believe that all British Columbians have been moved profoundly by the events of this past summer, whether it be another horrific fire season or the devastating consequences of record-breaking heat. 50 degrees in June in Lytton. The town disappeared in 15 minutes because of the intensity of the fire and the heat of the atmosphere. We have serious problems, not just in British Columbia, but globally. And I know that British Columbians are seized of that, probably more so than most British Columbians, if opinion research is to be believed. British Columbians want to see action. But we also have to acknowledge, and I've said this numerous times, that we are 5.2 million souls in a sea of 7 billion people. And we are going to need to have extraordinary efforts by national governments around the globe if we're going to be successful. And I believe British Columbians want us to be pushing the rest of the world to the place that we know we all want to get to, and in fact, we must get to by 2030 and then by 2050. There will be changes in people's lifestyle. We're going to do what we can to ease that burden, whether it be on offsetting carbon price increases with respect to low and medium income individuals, and for those who have more income, giving them the tools to transition from fossil fuel transportation to EVs, making sure that public transit is not just available but desirable to get from place to place. These are the initiatives that British Columbians want us to push, and that's where the roadmap will take us. Using smart regulation to reduce emissions, working with industry, working with communities, working with First Nations so that we can all collaborate, as we have on so many other issues in the past number of years. We need to do this together, and the plan will help us do that.
Peter Fairley, Investigate West.
Thank you. Premier, the IEA said earlier this year that there should be no new fossil fuel infrastructure from today, and specified that LNG investments made today are at risk of being stranded This spring, the World Bank evaluated maritime fuels and found that LNG bunkering is a dead-end policy, warning governments not to add policy supports for it. Is there a reason why BC can play by different rules?
Alternative to the marine industry is continuing with diesel and bunker fuel, and I don't believe that's an appropriate option. It's always been viewed as a transition fuel. I believe in the transition between where we are today and where we need to get to. It can continue to play a role. We had, and Peter, I don't know if you were following the cruise ship debate here at the legislature, but it became the issue of the day for the official opposition. And when I spoke with industry about the prospect of reducing their emissions, they praised the Port of Vancouver and Victoria for giving electric options well in port. We need to make sure we're doing everything we can to reduce those emissions. We don't get credit for them, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. If we can reduce international emissions by giving international maritime industries, whether it be moving important goods and services, food, and people, in the case of the cruise ship industry, I think it's appropriate that we do that.
Minister Heyman, over to you.
Thank you. One of the features of our roadmap to 2030 is that we know that technologies are changing rapidly, as well as the availability of different fuels. We hear what the IEA is saying. We have clear targets for emission reduction, both in use of fossil fuels in transportation, in buildings, as well as a clear sectoral target for the oil and gas sector. We're also promoting the development of clean hydrogen industry in British Columbia, as well as moving toward 100% electrification. One of the important features of our roadmap to 2030 is our reporting every year on how we're doing, as well as new measures we plan to take. We plan to evaluate what we're doing and ensure that we're current with the latest technologies, of the latest sources of energy, and that we're moving accordingly. But as the Premier said, we need to do that globally, not just in British Columbia.
Do you have a follow-up, Peter?
Do I get a follow-up? Thank you. For the Premier and for Mark Jaccard, please. BC is eliminating incentives for fossil-fueled heating in buildings now. Is it time to eliminate subsidies for fossil fuel production? And if not, why should British Columbians have any confidence that this government will stop the ongoing growth of carbon emissions as reported by your government today, let alone slash emissions by 2030?
Well, as have comprehensive sectoral targets for emissions, and they're real. And emissions must come down in all of these sectors, particularly oil and gas. We're just conducting a royalty review. We had two eminent academics do a review on the credit system as well as royalties. That's now out in the public, and we expect to make significant changes in the new year going into budget 2022. So we are working on these issues. We have been since we came to government, and it's coming to a conclusion now. And I'm confident that the industry fully understands where we're going. And as Minister Heyman said, tremendous hydrogen opportunities here in British Columbia. Because of our abundant electricity, we can do a whole host of things that other jurisdictions can't. And I'm confident that the targets that we've got in place and the reporting relationships that we've put in place within the legislature will be held accountable for those rather than just putting them out one day and forgetting about them the next. That's not the plan here, quite the opposite. And that's why we put the roadmap out today, so that when Minister Heyman is in Glasgow, we can say to the world that we need to take these steps. Here's a practical, achievable outcome that British Columbia has put in place, and we invite the world to follow.
Minister Heyman?
To Mark. I think to Mark.
Mark?
Hi, yeah, Mark Jaccard here. I just want to say that, first of all, the roadmap is to achieve the 2030 target that was promised by this government. So we on the Climate Solutions Council insisted on independent modeling, and it's the kind of modeling that has verified policies that will achieve targets in the past and verified when governments would not achieve their targets. So that's the key thing. Someone asked about lifestyle. Actually, no change in lifestyle. I know that's hard to explain, but for consumers, for households, it's the car you drive and it's how your home is heated dominates, and you won't notice it. People don't even know right now how their homes are heated. You asked about natural gas production. So there's an important issue there that the International Energy Agency talks about. It talks about whether total natural gas production over what time frame will go down or up. So natural gas production in some cases and in some regions can go up, but you need to make sure those production emissions are going down. And that's why we focused on that with the Climate Solutions Council, and we were very happy to see that the government adopted the policies that are needed, or say they will adopt, and is on a path to adopt the policies that are needed for that to happen. And finally, with respect to fossil fuel subsidies, it's a very contentious issue. Fossil fuel subsidies are finally declining. They are largest in developing countries where governments subsidize the final price of gasoline and diesel. And the subsidies that happened in North America were mostly for new production in oil and gas. But yes, we need governments, including this one, to make sure any subsidies are declining over time, and that will be a good test.
Our last question today comes from Les Lane, Times Colonist.
Oh, thanks. Premier, the background briefing this morning, they said the GHG inventory is coming out today. I haven't quite seen it yet, but he said it's up in BC 1% for the 2019 count over 2018. Can you just confirm that on the record? And also, what's your kind of response to that?
George, to respond to that, because I haven't seen the report you're referring to. Minister Heyman, can you answer Les's comment?
Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Les. We have had in place the CleanBC program since the end of December. We spent a couple of years beginning to implement the policies that are going to ultimately reduce emissions. We always knew they wouldn't go down in year one. Certainly they weren't going to go down in 2018 before we'd even developed the program. We also know that the federal government changed the way they account for emissions, and we rely on their accounting program. So they added new emissions from waste and land use, and that drove our emissions up. That made us have to work harder to develop a credible roadmap to 2030. We expect emissions that are being reported today and in the next year to plateau and then to begin to head down. But as Mark Jaccard said, this has been modeled. There's no surprise here. If people expect that you can develop a program and fully implement it in a year and see significant reductions in emissions, and we're talking about 2019 now, the year after we introduced CleanBC in December, it's not going to happen quite that quickly. What we need to do is ensure we incent the technologies that change emissions, that we provide the opportunity for people, particularly low and middle income people, to change the way their transportation works and the emissions from that, as well as home heating and cooling, that we work with industry to bring down their emissions. That's exactly what we've been doing since December 2018.
Follow-up, Les?
Yeah, thank you. Apart from CleanBC, we've been at this for 14 years now in BC, fighting climate change and setting targets and imposing strict new concepts to reduce emissions, and that accounting for all the different ways they're counting it, I've never seen them go down much. And you know, obviously, that BC missed the 2020 target by a country mile. Why is this big disconnect between these huge plans to cut emissions and the lack of any obvious progress in the GHG count?
George?
Thank you very much. You know, the problem with setting a target and not having a plan and a range of specific measures to meet that target is, as you pointed out, you don't meet the target. And that's exactly what happened under the previous government. I give credit to Gordon Campbell for introducing a carbon tax in British Columbia. It did begin to make a difference, but then we saw a 6-year period where there were no programs or policies to effectively drive down emissions. The difference between that and 2018 and 2021 is we have comprehensive programs and pathways with a range of options, initiatives across all sectors of the economy and community, ways to help average people do what they want to do, which is lower their carbon footprint, ways to help industry do what they know they have to do, which is reduce emissions and therefore be viable in a carbon-constrained world. Those are the measures that we've put in place in this roadmap. There's a multitude of them. We have the Climate Change Accountability Act that makes us responsible for reporting on our success or failure annually, and we intend to succeed along with all British Columbians.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us.